that for a second. In church, we need to understand that our assignment is not to be segregated, it's to be separated. There's a difference. Come out from among them and be separate, meaning be different. But you still need to live among them. I can't say because I'm a Christian, I'm not going to go to university and learn how to build a house. I'm just going to trust God. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I would just trust God to teach me how to fly a plane without learning how to fly the plane. Many Christians are like that. God will just make a way. I tried that before, investing in the stock market by divine revelation. It worked for a while, until the days I was under pressure where I had 5 seconds to make a decision. And in that anxiety, the divine revelation won't flow. God may be speaking, but you won't hear. Now you need some sort of knowledge and some sort of wisdom and some sort of understanding to put your heart at ease so God can speak. Does that make sense? When you know how to drive, you're confident driving, you're not worried about what gear to move next, then God can tell you, don't take your usual route, take this route. But if you're thinking, what do I do next? Your mind is so scattered that even divine revelation can flow. And so you need to be in the world, but not of the world. And so God takes them into Egypt. But now when he brings them out of Egypt, he says, hold on a second. You've learned to think like slaves. Now I have to distinguish between the principles of Egypt and the spirit of Egypt in your mind. So if it takes me 40 years to do that, I'm fine. If it takes God 40 years to bring you into a place where your mindset has been upgraded sufficiently to handle what I call the burden of freedom. Like Okwayemi said this morning, there is a burden of freedom. Freedom is not in itself a gift, it's a responsibility. In fact, freedom is bondage backwards. Because when you're in bondage, you don't need to make decisions. You don't have responsibilities. You don't need to make choices. You don't need to do anything. When you're in prison, you get fed, clothed, and you're told when to wake up. You're told when to sleep. In fact, many people get so healthy and develop so many good habits in prison that when they come back out, they want to go back. Prison is simply the army 24/7. That's why soldiers are some of the most disciplined and productive people in the world. Ex-soldiers, people who have been to the army before. In fact, in certain countries like Israel, young boys you cannot go in to do a job without spending at least 12 months in the army. Because it teaches you certain life principles that help the rest of your life. But now when you come out of that system, many of you were very, 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 very brilliant in high school. True? Because you were regulated. Somebody forced you to live a lifestyle that was productive. The minute you got to university, things fell apart because you couldn't handle the burden of freedom. Somebody talk to me. And so when you're free, it requires a level of maturity and understanding and discipline to maintain that freedom so it doesn't become a liability. And so God will not release you into certain levels of freedom until he can trust you to handle them. Are you with me? For instance, the United Kingdom will not give you a driver's license until you have proven you can drive on your own. Because if we give you a driver's license as you are right now, the casket business will double in size in 1 year. And so God will keep you in the wilderness as long as it takes to upgrade, not your spirituality, your thinking. Somebody say my thinking. My thinking. Say my thinking. Because if you look at it, it was in that wilderness that Israel had some of the most profound spiritual encounters. It was in the wilderness they got the 10 commandments. It was in the wilderness they built the ark of the tabernacle. It was in the wilderness Moses went up in a cloud for 40 days. It was in the wilderness God revealed himself to them on Sinai. All these things happened at the wilderness. It was in the wilderness where they saw quail fall from heaven. It was in the wilderness where they saw all the miracles, 90% of the miracles that they saw in the Old Testament of the spectacular miracles before the days of Elijah and Elisha were done in that wilderness. And so, honey, God is not looking for you to become a prayer warrior in the wilderness. It helps, but that's not what he's trying to fix. He's trying to fix your mindset. Say my mindset. Say my mindset. Say my mindset. Say my mindset. For instance, if I had to put it this way now, if you're a youth pastor, I'll give you an example, and anytime you go through a hard season, you don't have time for your teenagers. You think God's ever going to ask you to pastor a church? if you're a youth pastor and with the covering of a senior pastor over your head, keeping back certain levels of warfare from you, you can't find time to pray about your youth ministry. God's going to trust you with a church. It's not spirituality, it's mindset, responsibility. If you're in charge of a choir and you're in a bad mood so you don't show up in church on Sunday, you think God's going to ask you to pastor the church? Say mindset. Say mindset. Mindset. It's not necessarily the spirituality, it's the mindset. But now that God thinks they're now ready to fix their mindset, God says, fine, now you're ready to go into the land. Now, I understand that you're going to have some problems. Because first of all, the Bible says, let me give you a picture. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, right? So the angel of the Lord surrounds the righteous. What this means is Jerusalem as a city, or the area of Judea, meaning Jerusalem and the suburbs of Jerusalem. It's not just Nottingham, but Nottinghamshire, Long Eaton, and and Alfreton, and all these other places. We're surrounded by mountains. If you know anything about warfare, it is difficult to capture a city that is surrounded by mountains, because you can't have a free pass. It's almost like saying an entire army needs to get through that door. There can be 50 people in this room and they'll kill an army of 5,000, because all we need to do is stand at the door and shoot, because it has constricted your area of approach. We have to face a city of Jericho that their walls are as high, so as wide as they are high. God knows that you have to cross over a Jordan. And the Bible says, if you read chapter 5 of Joshua, like I read, that they crossed over Jordan when Jordan was overflowing its banks. You understand? What God is saying is, come on guys, talk back to me. What I'm saying is, God understands that to walk into your destiny, to walk into your place of inheritance, you are going to face increased levels of opposition and warfare. Are you listening to me? What God is saying is, before you walk into your place of inheritance, you're going to face an increased level of surveillance, an increased level of warfare, an increased level of satanic defense. Put it this way, I know that what I'm asking you to enter into, you cannot do. You don't cross a river when it's overflowing its banks. Come on, talk to me. Many of you are wondering, why is it that when you're giving me prophetic words about my future, it's at the same time when things are going wrong? It's a setup. I'll show you that in a second. It's a setup. In fact, God will orchestrate it such that the period of your deliverance, the period of your elevation, the period of your inheritance being released, walking into Canaan, will coincide with the most difficult, most obstructive, most satanically, demonically contested season of your life. In fact, the very thing he tells you to do, the very thing he says he is giving into your hands, you will look at it and say, God, there is no way in heaven, hell, or anything in between I can get this. Because it's a setup. For instance, if God says you're going to run a business that is going to make 5 million in turnover in that year, he will first take you through Egypt so you can understand how to run a business. He won't skip that part. So please don't sit down in your house and pray and say, God is going to bless me, and someone's going to walk up to me with a sack and say, go. No, it's not going to happen. You get on the internet, you get in books, you do research, you go to business mentors, you do your due diligence, you will learn how to run a business. True? You will get the skills, you will start to save money, you will start to do the natural things to prepare a framework. Then he will take you through a season where even your natural skills can't help, because he wants to do something. You will need those natural skills to maintain the business. Listen to me. You will need those natural skills to keep the business going. That's why he will force you to learn them first. But the process by which he gives it to you is what I want to show you. Are you with me? And if you would please smile and act like I'm not boring you, it'd be nice. Otherwise, you do star jumps. Okay. Because I feel a very depressive spirit hanging over the atmosphere. And so Joshua says to the people, sanctify yourself. Somebody say, sanctify yourself. Now when I say sanctify, many people immediately think about holiness, right? And you're right. The same word for holy is the same word for